Welcome back to my YouTube channel all about bees and my mini series on preparing for the new season and spring management. Today I will be telling you what you should be doing now and in the coming weeks in preparation for the new beekeeping season. Hot off the press is that after my 5-year sojourn in France and Spain, me and my wife have returned to live in the UK and settled in Cumbria. We still have some loose ends to tie up in Spain and are busy with repatriating into the UK. But I intend to get right back into my passion, which is beekeeping education. So keep a lookout for many more free videos on this channel and for the improver and advanced beekeeping courses I'll be running across the UK. If you are enjoying these videos, please click the like and subscribe button below, especially if you don't want to miss out on any new video releases. And I also welcome any comments and particularly questions, and I promise to answer them all. Now, I recognise that we are all at different levels in our beekeeping journey. So I will cover advice for new beekeepers who will be in their first nervous winter, improvers who want to improve their honey harvest or maybe make increase in the year ahead, and I will address potential beekeepers who have maybe been on an education course over the winter and are looking to source bees. We are now in February, and on milder days you will see your bees leaving the hive to forage on snowdrops, aconite and crocus. But take it from me, your bees have not survived the winter yet. If they have been fortunate to come through the snow of winter and all the floods, the varroa infestation, green woodpecker attacks, and bear attacks, oh no, sorry, wrong continent, but it would be a shame to lose them in spring, wouldn't it? But in my experience, more colonies die in early spring than any other time, and dead bees don't produce any honey, that's for sure. This chart shows the brood to adult bee ratio in the colony. Adult bees in blue and the brood in pink. With the light levels increasing, queen bees will have begun laying, and the brood area will be growing slowly whilst winter bees will be dying daily, and this results in an unequal balance. At this time, when the brood is greater than the number of adult bees, the brood can easily succumb if it suddenly gets colder, preventing the bees foraging, so please keep a close eye on them and feed if necessary. You can check your bees for stores by hefting each hive. Use 2 or 3 fingers of one hand and lift the hive from the bottom a few inches off the floor or stand on both sides and the front and the back, and this will give an indication of the weight. Depending where the bees have stored their honey, one side may be heavier than the other, which is why you check all sides. And if you don't feel a good few pounds in weight, at least 5 pounds, you need to feed them. You can also look in the brood nest to see if there are sufficient stores. But you need to choose a calm, warm day over 12 Celsius, and don't do this until March. Make sure you suit up, etc. Any frames of seal stores on the outside of the hive can be moved next to the brood at this time, and if low in stores, less than 2 full deep frames throughout the box, you need to feed syrup 1:1 ratio. That comes in at 1 kilogram of sugar to 1 litre of water, or fondant. The sugar and water are mixed using a stirring implement until the crystals are dissolved. There's no need to boil the mixture, but using hot water helps. When fully dissolved, the mixture is clear and a very pale straw colour. And if you feel the colony is low in stored pollen, you can feed pollen substitute or pollen supplement in the form of homemade pollen potties or products like candy pollen. You need to be aware that even if you did feed your bees well in the autumn and there's plenty of stores in the hive, they can still starve due to what is known as isolation starvation. This occurs when the bees break the cluster on a mild day for a cleansing flight, and then they recluster in a new position away from their stores, and a gap of just 2 or 3 inches between the bees and stores is enough for them to starve. Many beekeepers, including me, place fondant over the feed hole of the hive in January or December as an insurance policy against starvation, regardless of the situation with the stores in the hive. Use a contact feeder for the syrup, shown in the top 2 photographs, as it will take longer for the bees to take the syrup down, and once you start feeding syrup, by the way, keep going until the spring nectar flow starts and the weather improves. When feeding syrup, it is important to dribble some of it into the hive through the feed hole so the bees know it is there. If it is very cold and stores are low, place a block of fondant directly onto the top bars of the hive over the cluster of bees, as you can see in the photograph on the bottom, or over the crown board feed hole, as in the cold the bees don't take syrup down very readily. Now is a good time to check that your beekeeping equipment, suit, gloves, smoker, feeders and other tools and bits are in working order. When we moved to the countryside many years ago and I started keeping bees, I was unaware of the absolute carnage mice can cause to absolute anything, and I found quite a few bee suits, veils and gloves with chewed holes in them before I realised that you need to keep everything in mouse-proof containers. I use large plastic buckets with lids, and I also have a couple of old decommissioned freezers for storage, as these are mouse-proof. Now is also the time to make up your spare brood and super frames and to fit them with foundation, and you need to make sufficient for each colony you have. In the absence of drawn comb, I advise having at least 3 supers of foundation per colony ready, and at least 6 deep brood frames made up for each hive. Many new beekeepers get confused over the different types of frames that can be used. The brood frames in the deep box on the left are known as Hoffman frames. They are self-spacing due to the shoulders at the top, and if you are ordering from catalogues or websites, they are DN4 frames, which stands for Deep National Hoffman Frames. You can also use Hoffman frames in the super, shallow box, on the right, or other self-spacing frames known as Manley frames. The photo here shows castellated spacers fitted to the super and SN1 frames fitted. This stands for shallow national frames without shoulders. By the way, these type of frames are easier to uncap with an uncapping knife when you're doing the honey harvest. We generally use wide foundation in the brood chamber, and in the super can use either wide, unwide, or if you are after cook comb honey, you can use thin, unwide foundation. If using old foundation, by the way, you can freshen it up. I melt it very slightly by placing it in a greenhouse or car for a few minutes in the sun, or using a hairdryer to warm the foundation. Your first inspection, which by the way is not a full brood chamber inspection, should take place in March when the bees are flying and bringing in pollen. This is a good sign and should gladden your heart, as it means the queen has started laying and there is brood to be fed. Before approaching the hive, you need a spare clean floor, scorched with a flame and reduced entrance block. Get yourself fully suited up and gently smoke the entrance to the hive. Remove the roof, but do not remove the crown board, as this will keep the bees within the brood chamber and not all over you. Wait a minute or two and then, working quickly and carefully, use your hive tool to remove the mouse guard from the hive entrance. You then need to insert the hive tool between the brood box and the floor and split the two apart. Place the brood box on the upturned roof. Place the new floor in the same position as the old one. Then apply smoke under the brood box to move the bees up into the box so they don't get squashed, and then replace the brood box on the floor. You can then reassemble the hive. You can then check for stores by hefting the hive as described earlier, or if it's not too cold, you could have a quick peek inside the brood box. Remember, 12 Celsius, calm. If your hive has an open mesh floor, the inserts should have been left out over winter, but now, as the bees are raising brood, it is a good idea to replace it for a few weeks to give the bees a hand by preventing cold drafts. I must stress that this first inspection is not a colony inspection, and it is advisable to leave the brood frames alone for now. Depending on where you are in the UK, you can carry out your first colony inspection in March or April, although in parts of Scotland these don't take place until May. If you are not sure of the correct timing, you can always refer to the bee parameter, which is the flowering current. The view is that when this plant is in flower in your location, as long as it is a calm day over 12 Celsius, not raining and the bees are flying, it's the right time for the first inspection. Again, check for stores. This is also a good time to take a sample of adult bees for analysis, for disease, and you can use a matchbox for this at the hive entrance where the older forager bees are. Bear in mind you need about 50 bees, and it isn't easy to do. You may need to have a few goes, but you will get better the more you practice. It is also good practice to move your frames into a new clean brood box at this time. Smoke the entrance of the hive, remove the existing brood box and place it on the upturned roof with the crown board still in place. Position the new brood box on the original floor, and you can then proceed with your inspection of the frames, leaving the move box where it is and transferring the frames in the same position as they were in into the new brood box. If you find the brood box is clogged with full frames of stored honey, leaving nowhere for the queen to lay, you can remove some of these and replace them with sterilised drawn comb or frames of foundation. It is important that you do not split the brood. Make sure a frame of pollen and stores are next to the brood and seal stores are on the outside of the box. I would say you need about 4 full frames of stores. When adding foundation, I would also recommend you add them all together at one side of the hive and place them one frame in from an outside frame of stores. It is the young bees who make wax, and by keeping the foundation together you won't be splitting the young bee population, so they should be more efficient at drawing the wax out. Any brood frames that are older than 3 years, by the way, should routinely be replaced, and you can use an indelible ink marker to write the year on the top bar of each frame to assist you with this. Render these old frames down and collect the wax. As I said, fresh pollen going into the hive is a good sign that the queen is laying, and you can confirm this during your inspection by looking for eggs. Identifying eggs is an important part of beekeeping, and beginners often struggle to see them. The only thing I can say is that it comes with practice, so don't be discouraged, you will get better at it. I usually mark queens in the first inspection following the year they emerged, by the way, and there are a few good reasons for this. Firstly, I have found over the years that if you mark a new queen, the bees will often kill her and raise another one, which isn't good. Your bees are unlikely to swarm if a new queen is present in the hive, so you don't have to find her at this time. Just seeing eggs is enough to know that she is there for the rest of the season. If you wait until the following spring at first inspections to find the queen, it will be easier because there are fewer bees in the colony. There are usually no drones in the hive, so she, being the largest bee in there, will be easy to find. And finally, with no drones present, the bees are unlikely to kill the queen when she is marked, as any new queen they made would struggle to mate. I'll cover queen marking and clipping in a wee while, and we will also look at hive inspection cards, which you should complete after each inspection. Although you have eggs in the hive, you've still got things to worry about, and it doesn't always mean all is well. The queen could be a drone laying queen, i.e. the bees replaced her late last summer and she failed to mate, which means she will only be laying unfertilized eggs, which will only come out as drones. Or you could have laying workers. This happens when the queen is somehow lost, and after about 30 days some of the workers' ovaries will develop so they can actually lay eggs, but once again they will be unfertilized eggs, and all you will get are mini-sized drones. If you see the queen during your inspection, you will know it is a drone laying queen, but how else can you tell the difference? Well, a drone laying queen will keep a tidy brood area. The laying pattern will be orderly, i.e. compact patches of brood with very few empty cells, whereas with laying workers the laying pattern will be scattered and haphazard, as you can see in these two photographs. Additionally, a drone laying queen will usually lay one egg in the base of the cell, while laying workers will lay multiple eggs in the same cell, and they are more often than not on the sides of the cell because a worker's abdomen is much shorter than the queen. A drone laying queen will often lay areas of drone brood in the middle of larger patches of worker brood as she runs out of sperm. And finally, if the colony is trying to build charged queen cells, it is more likely that laying workers are present in your hive. The recommended procedure for dealing with a drone laying queen is to requeen the colony. That's if you have a queen available, or again, unite to a queen-right colony after removing the old drone laying queen. It is said by some to be impossible, however, to requeen a colony with laying workers, as the colony usually kills the introduced queen, and the bees from the laying workers hive are just as likely to kill the queen of any colony it is united with. Common advice in many books is to shake the bees out in front of a large colony and let them sort themselves out, entering any hive that will let them in. However, I have had some success with the following method, with a 75% success rate, so it is worth having a go if the bee population isn't too diminished and you have a new queen available. This is what you do. Remove the original hive with the laying workers in to a few meters away, and on the original site leave a new floor and brood box. Fill the box with 3 or 4 frames of sterilized drawn comb and place a cage mated queen between the 2 innermost frames. Put a crown board on top, roof, and leave the entrance open. You then take the original hive about 200 meters away. I use the car and shake all the bees off every frame. If you can't shake them all off, you finish off with a brush. It is said that laying workers cannot fly due to their extra weight, so they won't make it back to the hive, but the flying bees will. On arrival, they will find a new queen waiting for them, and as I said, this has worked well for me in the past. The times it hasn't worked, I suspect that some laying workers have made it back to the hive. You then need to make up the brood chamber with some frames of stores and feed syrup to keep the bees happy. They should release the queen from the cage in a few hours, and you need to check for eggs in 7 days' time. Good luck with that. You can't go wrong if you use Ted Hooper's What to Look For When Opening a Hive from his best-selling book, Guide to Bees and Honey. Use these headings every time you open up a hive and it will hold you in good stead. Firstly, has the colony sufficient room? Room for the bees themselves, room for the queen to lay, and room for the bees to store honey. Congestion is one of the underlying triggers for your bees swarming, so it is important that you give plenty of room for the colony to expand and for the bees to store honey, especially in the early season. Secondly, is the queen present and laying the expected quantity of eggs? You may not actually spot the queen, but if you see eggs, you can take that as a sign that she is present. But how do you know what the expected quantity of eggs is? Some queens are more fecund than others, i.e. they lay more eggs and have a larger brood nest. The famous quoted text that queens can lay up to 2,000 eggs every 24 hours, the same as their own body weight, may be true for some queens, but you also have to figure out what is occurring in the hive. In springtime, a decent queen will be laying well and the brood nest will be expanding, but she will not expand the nest larger than the bees can cover. This is why it is useful to have more than one hive, as you will otherwise have nothing to compare it with. In the early season, is the colony building up in size as fast as others in the apiary? If not, then something will be amiss. We come to mid-season. Are there any queen cells present? If so, you need to put your chosen swarm control method into operation. Most importantly, you need to be able to recognize the different types of queen cells, and I will cover this in more detail later. I do have a whole series of videos on this channel on swarming, by the way, and I highly recommend them to you. Are there any signs of disease or abnormality in the hive? Well, how would you know? Well, you need to learn what looks normal in the brood nest, and I will cover that in the next 2 slides. You should be able to see if something is not normal, and if it is not normal, seek advice from a more experienced beekeeper. Ted Hooper's final heading is, has the colony sufficient stores to last until the next inspection? Again, this is not easy to assess for beginners, but my advice is there should be at least 2 full deep frames of sealed honey throughout the hive, which equates to about 5 pounds in weight, and this will last until the next 7-day inspection, even if the weather takes a downturn. So I said last time, you need to be able to recognize what is normal in the hive. We've already covered eggs, so let's have a look at what healthy larvae looks like. Larvae is pearly white in colour, shiny, and lies in the bottom of the cell in a distinct C shape, as you can see here. Anything different from this requires investigation. This is a classic frame from a single deep brood box, healthy colony, and the bees will always set it out like this. The arch at the top is sealed honey, and next to that is stored pollen for feeding to the larvae. In the centre is sealed brood, all of a similar age, with more stores surrounding that. On the bottom right is a small area of drone brood, most of it sealed. This is an example of a hive inspection card, and I recommend you complete one for each hive after each inspection, otherwise you will forget what's going on, especially if you have several hives. Identify the hive number and the date. Spend some time looking at this hive inspection card. It's recording the brood pattern, whether eggs are present, whether you've seen the queen, and most importantly, when the next inspection is due, and work for the next inspection. We mark queens so it's easier to find her when the colony expands, to keep a track of her age, and to know if she's been replaced by the bees, known as supersedure, or a swarm is issued and you now have a new queen. The queen is easier to see as there are not many bees on the comb, but this queen stands out, the one who's marked here, due to the dot of yellow paint on her thorax. Some beekeepers go as far as to glue a collared number on the queen, like this photograph, and this is the only way you can be 100% certain it is the same queen. This queen is also being clipped. As you can see, the tip of her left-sided large wing has been snipped off. As the colony expands, the queen becomes more difficult to spot, even when marked. Look at the size of this colony. These are huge modified datum frames with lots and lots of bees. It would be virtually impossible to spot an unmarked queen in this populous colony, and even difficult to spot a marked queen. So you do need to learn to mark queens, and an important skill for any beekeeper is that you need to be able to handle the queen. I recommend you go on a course to learn this, maybe one of mine later in the year. If you are right-handed, use your right hand to pick up the queen, and it is easier if you don't wear gloves. Even these thin nitrile gloves can be a bit of a nuisance. Approach the queen from behind and immobilize her on the comb by applying slight but firm pressure. Clasp both of her large wings with your thumb and first finger and lift her off the frame. Transfer her to the tip of your first finger on left hand, and you will find that she will grip the finger with her legs. Then use your thumb to trap her legs. You want 3 legs ideally, so she doesn't spin around and break off a leg. Or the other way of doing it, you can hold her by the thorax with the thumb, first and second fingers, but make sure that you don't trap her antennae, and hold her firmly but gently. Queens are tougher than you think. These Posca pens are available online in all colours and can be used to mark queens, but they have a habit of leaking and pouring out lots of ink. So if you're not careful, you can drench the queen. I find Humbrol enamel paint and matchsticks better to use, but they are more expensive. Test the pen on your finger before applying to ensure the ink doesn't suddenly flood out. Apply a dot of paint on her thorax, making sure the ink or paint goes past the hairs, otherwise they will easily rub off. Allow the paint to dry and the job's done. Be careful when returning the queen to the hive. Don't just drop her onto the frame, as the bees can be startled and may suddenly ball her. Let her walk off your finger onto the frame and make sure she doesn't get squished by the way when you put the frame back into the brood nest. You should be able to pick up a queen by her wings, but if you can't, then you can use a plunger cage like this, and once the sponge plunger has immobilized the queen, you can mark her with a marking pen on her thorax. There is an internationally agreed colour code for queen marking, as seen here. So for this year, 2026, the colour to use is white. Last year the colour to use was blue. I do not recommend that beekeepers clip their queen's wings, as it is simply not necessary. It doesn't prevent swarming, and more harm can be done than good. As a commercial beekeeper with hundreds of hives, I did clip queens due to the time constraints involved and different management techniques I used. Here is the theory behind clipping queens. The queen leaves the hive with the swarm, but as she can't fly, she's usually lost on the ground. The bees may cluster around her for a while, but eventually they will return to the hive. The clipped queen, by the way, may also make it back. The colony can't successfully swarm now until the first virgin queen emerges. This allows you a longer time interval, 14 days, between colony inspections during the swarming season. Once queen cells are sealed, you can do 10-day inspection. Please bear in mind, again, clipping queens does not prevent swarming. We clip 1/3 of one side of the forewing, that's the big one. Bring the scissors in from the side to avoid stabbing the queen. Get the scissors in position, but then pause before cutting, as queens often raise a leg and you don't want to cut her leg off, do you? There's a video from the BBKA course in the case showing how to mark and clip a queen somewhere else on this channel, so have a look at that. To finish part 1, here are some practical tips to help you find the queen. Remember, practice makes perfect, or almost. So, look to find the queen at first inspections in spring on a warm, calm day when the temperature is above 12 Celsius. Use minimal smoke as you don't want her or the bees running about on the comb. You want her calm and the bees feeding on open nectar cells, which is what the smoke will cause them to do. Do not be distracted when looking for the queen. Concentrate solely on finding her and ignore everything else. She will probably be on a frame of brood where she was laying before you interrupted her, so don't waste time looking on the outside frames of stores, for example. When you get to the first frames of brood or eggs, examine the dark side of the frame first, as the queen will run from light into the dark. Be methodical in searching the frame. Have a system in place where you quickly search every part of the frame, but don't spend more than a few minutes on each side. After checking each side of the frame, insert it back into the box and pull it back against the previous frame, but keep the gap between the frames you have examined and those you haven't, as the queen won't come back through that gap and she'll always be in front of you. If you don't find her in the first look through the box, have a second attempt working your way back. If you still can't find her, then you can use paired frames. So you pair 2 frames of brood together, leave a gap of a couple or 3 inches, then another pair so that you have maybe 4 pairs of frames in the box with say 2 or 3 frames of stores outside the box. Put the crown board on top and go and have a cup of tea. When you return, if you are lucky, you will find the queen between one of the paired frames. Lift both frames from the box at the same time and look in the middle, which is the dark part. If your attempts fail, you can always try the wine method. Do you know this method? Well, this is what you do. You get on the phone to your beekeeping mentor or more experienced beekeeping friend and promise them a bottle of wine if they will come and find your queen. It does work a treat, and at one time I had a cellar full. Well, that brings us to the end of part 1. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned something. In part 2, I'll be looking at spring management, what you need to do to keep on top of the bees once the colony is expanding. We look at oilseed rate management, we look at swarming, and lots of other things to help you get the most from your bees. If you're enjoying these videos, please bear in mind that there are expenses involved, so you can go to Buy Me a Coffee link or the PayPal link below and make me a contribution. If not, they're all free anyway. Hope to see you all soon. Bye for now.